Listeners, welcome back. It's Megan here again with my yoga audio, and I'm your host. And I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of weeks of our book reading from my husband, Richard Morgan, and his published book from 2010 called Narya. So we're back now here in the month of May with another guest, and Rhydell Paynter is our guest today on Maya. He's the chief network engineer for the government of Bermuda, but more importantly, he's also a cancer survivor, a proud father, husband, and my big brother. He's a community activist making a difference as a speaker, volunteer, and mentor for the Bermuda Diabetes Association and a prostate awareness group that provides support for men and their families by promoting men's health initiatives and helping those that are underinsured or without insurance to receive screening and assistance with treatment. So, yes, you might have noticed I'm continuing the family conversations this month. Last month, you met our sister, Cecelia, and today you have the honor of meeting Rhydell. You'll note, if you already listened to the other interview, that running sophisticated networks and IT operations is a skill and a gift that both my siblings have. And alas, I do not. But today, the conversation with Rhydell and I, we're going to have will more revolve around our personal connection and relationship than the work listed on our resumes or on LinkedIn. And he'll be sharing more about his life journey thus far and how he's helping to make a difference, not just in our family's lives, but in the lives of many others too. Rhydell, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, my love.
He's here and I'm so excited. He's got such a great smile. He's if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll note his New York Giants background. He's a big fan of the New York Giants.
Absolutely. Yep.
Rhydell, I wondered, I mean, I've kind of read this intro about you, but I'm wondering if you would introduce yourself to our listeners and how you would define who you are in the world right now.
Yeah. Thank you. Basically you said it all, so I guess end the interview. Uh, seriously, no, I'm a very passionate person. I'm a person that loves to help others. I've always been like that. My journey has been not your plain old vanilla picket fence dog and everything else. I've had some challenges in my life. I've had a lot of good things happen in my life, but I've also had some good people in my life. And the one of the biggest joys of my life was actually meeting both of my sisters at separate times. I met Cece when she and Kurt were at Wesleyan, and I met you a couple years later and Bermuda. So it was a big part of my life, and it was something that because we did have an elder brother, and he passed away when I was 6 months old in an unfortunate accident in at the house next door. So there have been a lot of like trials and tribulations, and I guess if I had one thing to say is that you don't have to let your surroundings be what you are about. Just because you had bad things happen, you don't have to be continue the circle. You can get help, get support, get somebody to help you. And if you're strong enough to do it yourself, break the circles. And if you see something, you inherently as a human, you know what is right and wrong. If you're doing something wrong or something wrong is happening to you, speak up and try to make a difference. And I think that's one of the things that I more or less pride myself is not to sit down and go back and lick my wounds and blame the world. I just try to sit down and say, okay, these are the cards that I've been dealt with, and let's try to play them as good as I can.
Yeah. I wonder if you would share with with me and with our listeners about what it was like for you growing up in Bermuda and for some time I think in England that you went to school there.
Yeah.
Some of your core memories and experiences. For listeners, just to give you a little bit of background, Rhydell, like Cecelia and I, Rhydell and I did not grow up together, and I didn't meet him in person until I was 22. Chance and surprise meeting, which was definitely one of my core memories, even at the age of 22. So I'd love for listeners, whenever I try to explain to people where Bermuda is, they always inevitably think it's in the Caribbean, which
Mm,
it's not.
mm.
It's north of the Bahamas, about 350 miles east of South Carolina. Um, but yeah, I'm just more curious about your experiences growing up, some of the things that kind of help define who you are and the man you are today.
Okay, so growing up in Bermuda was kind of was different. From the main thing is that I did grew I went to school in Bermuda. So base my let me start over. Sorry,
Okay.
I was brought up by my grandparents, my mother's mother and father. And so that was my mother and my daddy. My mom was in my life, but she was not in my life. She wasn't close. She was more like a sister than a mother, whereas my grandmother was my mother. So she was my everything. She was great to me. She done a lot of things. She like I talk her, and even today, even though she's been going quite a number of years, if something comes up and says, not being his grandson, that's not going to happen. So I exalt my grandmother. She done a wonderful job, and my grandfather as well. When I was at 3 years old, actually, I spent my third birthday in New York with my aunt. So I've been I'm a person that was raised by a village. So the
Mm.
person in New York was not my biological aunt, but she was an aunt. She was older than me. I was brought up with to respect. So it was everybody was Uncle so and so or Aunt this person
Mhm.
and everything else. So Aunt Minnie had come to Bermuda and she I can't remember how she met up with my grandmother, but she ended up staying in our house and she became a lifelong person and she was another person that was instrumental. So I grew up in Bermuda. I went to school in Bermuda, but for every vacation, every summer vacation, every winter vacation, as well as depending on how Easter came out. If you had 1 or 2 weeks at Easter break, I was always in New York. So I did my growing up in New York, but I went to school in Bermuda. But Bermuda is a very uh, it used to be very tranquil. It's a beautiful place. Definitely, the beauty has not gone anywhere. But we got caught up in the 20th century with YouTube and TV shows and everything else. So Bermuda is becoming a small city type of thing.
Mhm.
Only 65,000 people, um, 9 parishes, wonderful place. Uh, Education is a big bone of contention these days, particularly in Bermuda. But where isn't it a problem? But it's Bermuda was great. I had the privilege of growing up on a farm. So my uncle had horses, so I learned how to deal with animals at an early age, and I did a lot of horseback riding. We had cows, pigs, so I had to learn how to muck out stables, feeding and cleaning, grooming, and various other things. And my uncle just passed in February, and we had a good send off for him. So it's been growing up in Bermuda was is good. Um, the other part, when you're talking about my English experience, I've spent approximately 5 to 6 years in England through cable and wireless. That's
Okay.
my second employee. My first employee was my grandfather. He did construction, and I was a mason, a helper. And so I learned a lot of things. I was always good with my hands, and wanted to work with my hands and everything else. So I was pretty smart academically. I liked electronics and stuff like that. So I ended up in the telecommunications field. So I did 18 and a half years of cable and wireless. In that 18 and a half years, I did 1 year, actually almost 1 and 3/4 years in England at the training college at Porthcurno in Cornwall. And then I did another that was in 82 to April 82 to December 83. And then in 88, I want to say February, I went to London for 6 months, a place called Chelmsford, which is 60 miles outside of London, east of London. And then I did another 6 months down in at the same cable and wireless college for my advanced course. So I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time, and I've also been on other different service manager courses and various other things in the UK. So I've had a lot of experiences up there. Some good, some bad. It's just like anything in life. It's what you make of it and how you tend to deal with it. So
Mhm.
I've had a lot of experiences. So talking about the New York Giants, because I've spent so much time in New York, I actually consider myself a New Yorker. My aunt had foster children, and who I consider my brothers and sisters because I actually grew up with them. And one Jerome, the youngest brother, who ironically has had the same birthday as Sheena, my wife, he passed away 2 years ago. But we all keep in contact. We're still very close, and so all of my teams are New York teams. As your husband and I share the same love for the New York Giants, and sometimes it's hard to love them, but that's our team. Um, New York Knicks, they're having a good basketball season. So I'm following them again, and the Yankees, and hey, so lots of experiences, lots of things, and some things that I can and shan't talk about. But no, it's all we are the sum of our experiences, and I've been fortunate enough to have had a varied amount of experiences, and I think that I try to pull the best from all those things, and that's what has made me the type of person that I am today.
Yeah. This I wanted to return to the concept of home. I know in terms of my relationship with Bermuda, I have very vague memories of being there when I was, I think, about 4 or 5 years old
Hmm.
when I went with, and I too was raised by my grandparents. I think most readers know that, or listeners know that about me. So we have that in common too, that
Hmm.
we were each raised by our grandparents. But not knowing, due to family secrets, miscommunications, I didn't
Hmm.
know about you
Hmm.
until I turned 21 and
Hmm.
then decided to book a trip to Bermuda to try to figure out where this part of my family was and who was there. And I was misinformed that you were still living possibly in the UK at the
Hmm.
time. So I did not, the only person that I was aware of was our uncle, who
Hmm.
has since passed away. But at the time, and it's a weird twist of fate, my college roommate's boyfriend was from Bermuda. And we were sitting and talking one day, and I mentioned the name of our uncle, and he said, "Oh, that name sounds familiar to me." He's like, "I'm going to ask my daddy if he knows this guy." And it turns out his dad knew our uncle.
Hmm.
So he went home to Bermuda on a visit, got our uncle's address and phone number, wrote it down on a piece of paper, brought it back to Canada, to Ottawa, where I was living at the time, and gave it to me. He said, "If you ever go to Bermuda or if you ever want to call this number, this is your uncle." So Richard and I, we decided to get married while we were in Bermuda, but we had booked this trip to find our family. So
Hmm.
I had this phone number and address of our uncle. Get there, and we were there for 10 days, and I'm calling and calling and calling every day, and the phone would just ring and ring. Didn't have an answering machine. I was like, I don't know how to find this person. So it was like our second or third last day. It was like day 7 or 8. We
Hmm.
finally just went to the address and started wandering up and down the street trying to find the house. And I didn't know what I was going to do, leave a note or whatever, and ran into this man who said, "Who are you looking for?" He could tell we weren't from there. And he said, "Well, that's my daughter. Your uncle is married to my daughter." He's like, "They're at work. Like, this is why they're not answering your call."
Hmm.
He gave us the address of our aunt's workplace. We went down there, and it was just literally like bang, bang, bang. Everything happened all at once, and we were like
Hmm.
hugging in the street, and it was like, what's going on? She said, "I'm going to call the family. We're going to all get together tonight." So in my mind, up until that point, it was this one aunt and uncle, and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, I guess maybe there's some cousins, or they, like, I didn't know anything. And so that night, my recollection is just being at their house, and people kept walking in, and "This is your cousin, and this is your other uncle, and this is," and I remember so distinctly you walking in, and I was like, "Oh, are you another uncle I don't know about?" And you were like, "Nah, baby, I'm your big brother." And we just both burst into tears. And I was like, "What?" Like, my mind couldn't even, there's a great picture. And I think Richard took it of us when you
Hmm.
said that to me, and we just instantly like grabbed one another and started hugging and crying.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we're both welling up,
Yeah.
about that. So yeah, nah, it was it like you say, it was fake, and it was ironic because knowing our aunt at the time, the just I'll tell the listeners that why I was thought of being yet another uncle was because the Painter side of our family are very quiet and having we're not big stick out type of people. Our grandfather, Percy Painter, was a celebrity in Bermuda, and he was a part of different bands, and he was on
Mhm.
radio and TV. Our father, Ronald, was primarily a bartender and an ambassador to Bermuda. The uncle that you're talking about used to be in the, I think, SO Steel Band, Uncle Neville.
Yes. Hmm.
And so when you were meeting aunts and cousins and everything else, it was not on the Painter side, it was on the Simmons side, it was on her side of the
Mm.
family. So I guess, after talking about it with you, it was meant when I came, you just assumed that it was just another Simmons type of person. But no,
Hmm.
it was actually from from our father's side. And it was like, wow, because it after going to New York and driving up to Connecticut and meeting Cece and Kurt, it was kind of like, I said, I got to make it my mission. We have to reach out to Megan. We all knew about you and everything else, but we just didn't know how to contact you. Again, miscommunication and family things, which we don't have to go into, but it's funny. The thing that really pissed me off, for lack of a better expression, about this family quietness and secretness is the fact that I did not know about Cece until our grandmother passed away, our grandma Ruth. I found out about her for the first time, and she was actually living in Bermuda and going to school and everything else. And she grew up in New York. Being a believer of faith and the universe and all the rest of those type of things, I got kind of pissed off and really mad about the fact that I could have been running the streets in New York and bumped into my sister and started to hit her up, and we go out and everything else, and it could end up, that's the type of things that I think about, and that's why I try to be as open book as possible with all my children, with everything else, with my prostate cancer journey, with everything, my health. I'm open because I don't want to get in. I think that silence, or for whatever reason, and I'm sure there were some legitimate reasons why things were kept from us or things were said a certain way, but a lot of hurt comes from those things. And I think that we all have done things that we shouldn't have, and we all have been in unfortunate situations. And one of the things that I try to do on a daily basis is I try to sit down and say, I try not to hurt anybody anymore. And if I can wrong anything that if I have wronged something, I would try to correct it. If somebody points it out, I say, hey, you made me feel like this at this particular time, and I'll correct it. I'll eat humble pie and I'll
Hmm.
apologize and do things. So I try to be different. And the thing about it, the irony of it, again, more irony when it comes to our family. Like I'm the oldest of the three of us, and I never knew our father. I met our father twice, and it wasn't in the best of circumstances, but you know I just wish that I could get more to find out. I found certain people that used to hang out with our dad, and they sit down and say, right now, you're just like your daddy, you're this, that, and the other. And which is ironic because obviously genes mean something because I didn't know to do.
Yeah.
But it was funny when I did. I remember distinctly at 16, I said, "Man, I got to go find out about my father because I didn't know why he wasn't in my life. I didn't know if it was something to do with my grandparents, my mother, or whatever. So I was trying to reach out, and that's when I found out that he was actually in Canada. I come to find out, I think he actually made a stop in New York. He may have seen CC. Then he came up to Canada and saw you, and that's where he passed. So here I am, a 16-year-old trying to find some answers and everything else, and I never got those answers. Uncle Neville, bless his soul, is never he's never been an outgoing type person and everything else. And when I used to ask him about our dad, he would say, well, he was this, that, but he would never get down into the nitty gritty. Their younger brother, Uncle Mill, we're tight, and everything else. But unfortunate that he was more or less separated from Ronnie and Neville because of age. So he
Mm-hmm.
never really hung out, and that was just his older brother. So I look at it like this, sir. I could sit down and be mad at the world, mad at the universe that I don't know. I didn't know my father. And sometimes my wife and I talk about it all the time, like, right out, do you really want to, you can find out this and you find out. I think that I'm at peace, and it's kind of like I don't need that crutch anymore. I don't need to lean on to find out what, what he was like, what he was. I'm me, and I have a good relationship with my siblings. I love you. I love Cece. You and I get together and we're talking for 2 and 3 hours, and we don't even realize it. And when we're in the same jurisdiction, like the last time we met in Lake Tahoe, we had a blast. We when you was in Canada, we had a blast. It's just everything. Every time I'm with you, like it's just quality time. When CC comes to Bermuda and Kirk comes to Bermuda, we have a blast. So I can't let the legacies of what happened before dictate to where I am now. And all I can do is to just be better and make sure that our children know who each others are. We have a relationship and everything else. And so that's what it's about. It's about love, and at the end of the day, it's just trying to be a loving person.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. So when I first found out about um you and Cecilia and other family members, I will admit I was really mad. My relationship with my grandparents at that time was fractured, I'd say, for at least 2 or 3 years because I was just so angry that this had been kept from me. And I was like, I've lost like 20 years of not knowing these people or this side of my family. And I didn't know how to fix that. I didn't know
Mhm,
with short of going there, which is why I booked the trip because I was like, well, that's it. It's small enough. I figure if I just that was literally my plan. I'm just gonna go and walk around and talk to people until I figure out
mhm,
where my family is. And like you
mhm,
said, divine intervention, as fate would have it. My roommate's boyfriend was from Bermuda, got me the
mhm,
connection with our uncle, which without that, now I don't know if I would have been successful in
mhm.
finding you. I don't know how else we would have found one
You could have
another.
waited a few more years for Google search.
Yeah, actually, that's true, right? The evolution of the internet would have,
We
yeah,
would have
because
hooked up there.
that was
Mhm,
90s, like early 90s,
mhm,
mid 90s. So probably eventually we would have found one another because then as soon as I got onto Facebook, that's when I started finding other relatives. I'd get messages from people. Are you the Megan from Bermuda? I think I'm your uncle. I think I'm your
mhm,
cousin. I think I'm your,
mhm,
and it's all been legitimate. So as much as we can deride social media, it actually has helped me connect with even more family members. But since that time, like in having my own children, like so after Richard and I went to Bermuda, got married, had Sandel 2 years later. And it's funny how a child kind of unites everybody, right? So it was
mhm,
like you being her godfather and like being
mhm,
able to come to Canada and meet more of my family here in Canada. I was able to I've come to an understanding, a certain level of understanding and forgiveness for what led to, the secrecy and hiding things away I may not agree with. I definitely don't
mhm,
agree with all those decisions, but at this point, like you said, there's nothing we can do about it except build from here. And
mhm.
so, and like Cecilia and I kind of talked in our conversation last month, the nature versus nurture thing is really pretty incredible, right? When we meet people who knew our father, and when they say, oh, you have this look or you have this expression, or oh, your father used to do, stuff like that, it's really interesting because none of us really grew up with him. Cecilia a
Mhm.
little bit. Um that we have some of those characteristics, not just looks, but also behaviors.
Ironically, when I was looking at the interview that you guys done, one thing like really hit a nerve. The the anti-apartheid thing.
Mm.
When I was in Chelmsford in London, in '88, I joined the anti-apartheid group within the college.
Hmm.
And I remember doing marches and having meetings and stuff like that. And I found that like, wow, three siblings that don't have at that time there was no connection. And I think
Hmm.
if I think about the ages, like when all of us done it, we were about the same age in college. So it was kind of like, okay, it's now at age, whatever age I was at that time, you have to do it. Okay, CC, at this age, you have to do it. Okay, Megan, at this age, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, like, there has to be some bigger thing going on here than just, chance by chance type of thing. And that just goes to show the type of people that we are. And it's in our genes. We can't do nothing about it. So
Hmm. Yeah, I love it. I wondered if we could switch over to kind of talk about something that's been impacting your life the last 10, 12 years. So the day, I will never forget, the day after I moved to San Francisco to
mhm,
start grad school, it was like the
mhm,
next morning, and I was like sitting having my morning coffee or tea or whatever, and you kept calling, and I was like, "What's going on?" And you revealed to me that you had received a prostate cancer diagnosis, and my
mm,
heart just like dropped into my belly. I'm wondering if you would kind of tell us a little bit, whatever you feel comfortable sharing about that time and your journey through
mm,
diagnosis and treatment and kind of what's happening now. Because I know right now a lot of really positive things have come out of that experience.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
As you know, and people that know me, I'm an open book. I try to, if you can learn from any mistakes or anything that I've done, I'm willing to help. So when it came to my health, I'm not a big gym nut. I'm not a person that goes around eating grape nuts and has all this type of thing. I was diagnosed with diabetes approximately, I can't remember. I'm so old now. Like I go 60 this year. So that's my new thing. I'm going 60 this year, so I'm allowed to forget stuff. So I had been diagnosed with uh, diabetes uh, a few years prior to my prostate cancer diagnosis, and I was actually diagnosed by my physician in Florida, who will come back later on in the story. She diagnosed and said, okay, you need to get on this medication, da 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 da. I was coming back to Bermuda, so I tried to use the prescription. And of course, doctors cannot write prescriptions across borders. So I needed to get a local physician to so that I can get on my diabetes journey. So I ended up with this Dr. Hope Gill, who was elderly man, but he was an elderly doctor, but he was good. And I got on my regimens. I got on my regimens. So every 3 months, I was doing my blood. I changed my diet a little bit. I actually got involved with a dietitian, and she's been my dietitian for all these years. She has a file like about so big. She always brags about that I'm her number one patient, and I'm doing a below illness and everything. She could tell me everything. So I've been fortunate that whenever anything that's happened in my life with regard to my health, I've always had a good under undergirding of physicians and people in my life. So and I've always taken my health serious. So the doctor in so this is going back to 2008. He said, look, I was 45 years old. He said, let's just take a PSA test just to for giggles, so to say. No, just to see what it comes out. At that time, the you didn't start screening for prostate cancer until 50. But because I was a diabetic and I'm going to be getting I do bloods quarterly. That's
Mhm.
just tick a box and get a PSA test. So my PSA came back and it was not above my range. So basically the PSA level goes with your age. So it was within tolerance, but it was on the higher level, closer
Elevated.
to the high. Yeah, it was elevated. So the doctor said, well, let's look at it in 6 months and see what it looks like then. Because the PSA central prostate specific antigen, and there could be various things that could make that go up. If you had like a hard bowel movement, for example, or you was under a lot of stress or different other things, or a lot of things can actually impact that reading. So that's just an indicator. It's not something that actually will say that you have or have not. You don't have unless you have really, really high prostate numbers. So 6 months time again, we went and checked. It was still within range, but very high. So then he referred me to a urologist, Dr. Dyer. So I got referred to Dr. Dyer, and he says we're going to do a few things. What we don't know what's going on, but we're going to basically go on a path on a journey. So the first thing was the dreaded DRE, the digital rectal exam, the finger, something that most men don't. They that's one of the biggest things that stops men from actually going to doctors and various things like that. And that's where the Daily Meal is coming in a little bit further down the road. So I know my sexuality. I know I don't have any questions or whatever. And if uh, forgive me for being blunt, but if a 15-minute jab is gonna a 5-minute jab is gonna save my life, like go for it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so basically, so basically he went in and, so the engineer in me, and that's one thing with cable nomads, didn't say I went to study to be an engineer. Um, the engineer in me wants to know how things work, why you're doing this and everything. So I asked Dr. Dye, I said, Doc, what are you feeling for? And he says, okay, if you clench your fist and you clench your fist, a good prostate feels like the soft part, like between your thumb and your knuckles.
Oh.
And if you start feeling nobules, like what you're feeling in your knuckles,
Uh-huh.
then that's a potential indication. So they're actually looking to see if it's
Oh.
enlarged or if it's spongy and
Okay.
knobbly. So it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And again, everything in my life is like I know the specifics of all my medications. I know the specifics of why you do this or why that, because the engineer in me has to know what leads up to
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So anyway, he said it was a little enlarged, but it still was relatively soft. So then we had to do the ultrasound. Silly me, looking having had children and understanding ultrasounds, I'm saying, oh, so you're gonna put this thing across my check, put some gel. No, it's actually a wand that goes in
Oh,
the
the internal. Yeah.
oh, and it goes to the rectum. And it's a very unpleasant thing to say the least. And it's right now techniques have shown that that's not the way to do it, but that's for another talk show.
Okay.
Um, so this ultrasound goes in next and it looks at the prostate, and that came back negative as well. So
Okay.
they said, okay, your PSA is still high, so let's do a biopsy. So the biopsy was done, and it's basically using the same lovely wand, and it has uh, basically these needles come out, and so it's like a staple. So you're sitting there and you're click, 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 and you're all awake. And they do give you some numbing, anesthetize you, but it's just not a good feeling and everything else. But anyway, so of the samples, they took 10 samples. Three of the five on the left side were cancerous, and the right side was clear. So Dr. Dyer called myself in. He told me, make sure that you bring your wife. So I went. So both Sheena and I went, and that's when I was given the diagnosis. He said there is nothing to blame, whatever, and obviously I didn't know if there was a history of prostate cancer in
Mm.
the family because of our secrets, and I suspect that one or two of our uncles may have passed from or have had prostate issues. and it might even go back to our grandfather, but again, another talk show.
Mm.
Um, so he said, "This is what you have to do." So he gave us some literature to read and various other things, and basically, don't blame yourself. There's nothing you could do. It's not like you were smoking and you got lung cancer. It's not that prostate cancer doesn't work like that. So it was devastating to say the least. Um, the best person on earth the I could have been with was Sheena. She's been my rock. She understands and she's very pragmatic and her she's very calming. We had just recently been married, and one of the things in reading the literature about prostate cancer is that there's a strong possibility that I may end up with permanent erectile dysfunction. Now I have this young, pretty wife, and I'm just starting a brand new marriage, and that to me was devastating. Because I'm a man. I want
Hmm.
to be with my wife, and it was like it came down to the point where she was like, "Rhydell, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's just get you dealt with, do what we got to do, blah blah blah, and we'll go on from there." So what happened is there are various treatments, radiation, chemo, radical prostatectomies, wait and see. I was only 45, so prostate is not one of those cancers that will actually come and you're diagnosed today and you're going to die tomorrow type of thing. So it's a slow cancer. I was fortunate enough to have caught it in its very early stages.
Hmm.
So we did all the research and everything else, and we wanted to go with the robotic nerve spring technique. So the nerve spring part is that the prostate actually is about the size of a walnut, and it has a network of nerves that sit on top of the prostate. So if the cancer is enclosed into the prostate and doesn't get out to the nerves is what does blood flow and helps out with the directions. So if they get the cancer before it gets to the nerves, there's a strong possibility that you will actually, you can get back to regular sexual function.
Okay.
So all this is going on, and we're making all these decisions and everything else. And because remember, I said I had a physician in Florida who actually diagnosed me um, with diabetes. She, I said, Dr. Dyer, I want to go to a place where I feel I have a doctor that knows me. I don't want to go to most of the people that have any type of procedures off island are usually sent up to Boston, Brigham Young, Leahy, John Hopkins, and those type of places. Another thing that I'm a relatively private person, and we didn't want to go to Bermuda Central to
Mm.
be going through a prostate journey and say, "Oh shit, what's that? What you doing up here? Oh what? Right now it's got it," and then it will be all over social media, blah, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So I said I wanted to go to the Florida area because I had a doctor in Orlando that I was happy with. So Dr. Daya found Dr. Patel, who was at Florida Hospital, which is now Advent, which is in a place is near Celebration, which is about 5 miles away from Disney. It's just literally across the
Okay.
interstate. And we ended up doing that, and come to find out that that was the best decision of my life, simply from the fact, again, the universe coming together. This doctor was the doctor that was training multiple doctors to do this procedure. So he's kind of like to use a vernacular, he's like the prince of prostatectomies. He's
Okay.
like, or the Michael Jackson. He's the
Yeah.
rock star. Everybody knows about this doctor. And I stumbled on him by fate of chance, the same thing how we got to that by saying that I wanted to go to this particular place. Um, we went there. The hospital was next to a place called at the time it's called the Mona Lisa, which is across the parking lot from the hospital. So we used to take golf carts for my back and forth and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
The service that was provided by the Cancer Institute was the Rolls Royce service. And it was not, like I said, by chance. It wasn't something that I knew about or whatever, something that I wanted to go to Orlando, and this is what happened. And this service that we had consultations prior to us leaving Bermuda. We had consultations while we were up there. We had
Mm-hmm.
consultations while we had classes and stuff after, excuse me, after the surgeries and everything else. It was soup to nuts, and it was every step of the way we were
Mm-hmm.
given either information or we can ask questions, or everything was like first class. And after the operation, we had to go to a class that was called penile rehabilitation. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about prior to us coming on air about when we all know people that have been in accidents or have had some sort of trauma, and they've had to learn how to eat, walk, and various other things like that. So in order to gain the functions back, you need to learn how to get erections and various other things. And this doctor had a team second to none that did sit down and talked with the patient and the partners on different things about penis pumps, Viagra, and all the rest of these things, because it's to learn how to get an erection again, it's you have to basically do things just like you go to the gym
Mm-hmm.
to do yoga and various things. You have to do these things to be able to. It's a muscle, so in
Yep.
order to get, you have to work the muscle to use it. And ironically, I will say this as a kind of lightening the mood is that when we were doing one of the consultations with Dr. Patel, he looked at my wife and said, you have to, in order for Rhydell to get back to peak performance, you need to, it needs to go like 3, 4, 5 times a week. And I looked at him and was like, yes, no.
A prescription for
That's the prescription. I said, honey, you see, I didn't say that. That's what Dr. Patel said. I would, I'll be last, but I mean, he's saying it's got to be more. So, anyways, it's a running joke between she and I. But it's something again. And one of the things that we were taught when we first went up to Dr. Patel is that there, his goal is to get you back to the same sexual function that you had prior to coming in or above.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like wow. And so all the things that I was worried about in the beginning of the journey that my wife told me put in the background,
Mm-hmm.
it got addressed, and it got addressed in 4 or 5 times a week. Who's going to argue with that? So yeah, so it was, we had the operation. We were up in celebration for about a month. I had to do a lot of walking. You know, I had the operation around 12 o'clock in the daytime, and 10 o'clock that night, I was up walking. And that was part of the procedure because it was using this machine called the Da Vinci machine. So basically, it's like a video game. The doctors actually got probed, like 5 probes, 4 or 5 probes in you, and he's actually operating at a screen. So one of the things that they have to do is they distain your abdomen with carbon dioxide to blow it up so that they can have room to work. And after they close you up, there's invariably some gas trapped in.
Right.
And the gas that to pass that gas, the only way to do it is by physical exercise. So that's why one of the reasons we were up walking. I never had any symptoms from prostate cancer. I never had any problems, no bladder problems, none of I was fortunate. I caught it
Mm-hmm.
early, but I never up until the day I had my operation, I never had any symptoms. I had more pain from trying to pass this gas than
Mm.
anything else.
I believe
And
it.
and the thing about it is that I make another light aside. It's like passing that gas was like better than the best sex ever. I cannot tell you.
Once it came out.
I can't tell you. It was embarrassing because we were in the hospital hallways, and it was crazy. One of the things that another funny thing is that my family, we tend to deal with any type of trauma in a jokey way. So when we take the children to the hospital, like when they were younger, and we were going to the hospital, we will be in the emergency room laughing, or in the thing laughing, and the nurses and doctors come like, "What's so funny? But that's how we all our children are like that. So when I'm coming out of recovery and I'm getting wheeled into the place where we're going to stay that night after the operation, my wife says, "Honey, we came past the sorry, it was next to so the recovery ward for the men that had the prostate surgery was here, and next door was the maternity ward. So we
Oh.
got wheeled past the maternity ward, and she goes, so I'm still a little groggy from coming out of surgery, and she says, "Honey, we had a little girl." How you talking about? Like, you know. So, anyways, so again, that's just how it is. But these are the type of things, and like I love my wife's spirit. I mean, I really, I'm fortunate to have her in my life. She's my rock. She's my everything. I've been married 2 times before. This is her first marriage, and I mean, she give a little so and so like me a chance after two other people that we've been married for 20 years now. So like
Mm.
she's bit there is no more, there is no other, and I'm pleased. I haven't been as fortunate as my two sisters to have those long-term relationships and finding the right person. But it's ups and downs and everything else, but she's great. And that prostate journey was great. Um, I can't say it was great. That prostate journey was a learning experience, and one of the things that is important when I first was diagnosed, I knew that one of my colleagues at Cable and Wireless, he had gone through a journey, and he came down here and he shared everything with us. He talked about
Mm.
the physical, what to expect. He talked about the catheters, the recoveries and everything else, and it was got I wouldn't say gruesome, but it was
He wasn't
no
filtering it.
filters.
Yeah.
It wasn't filtered. It was and I appreciated that. Tina appreciated that because we knew what we were getting ourselves into, and it helped make the decision.
Yeah.
So going forward now, that's why when I came home and I became an advocate, a
Hmm.
personal advocate, I believe in paying it forward. I always give props to my partner, Norman, Dr. P, when I talk about prostate cancer because he's the person that helped me, and then I have been that way with everybody else. I was involved in a club in Bermuda called North Village Community Club. I also was involved with the Bermuda Public Services Association at the time, which is now the Bermuda Public Services Union. So I have been an advocate for men's health, and anytime anybody wants to ask any question about prostate cancer, I will be there. We ended up forming a group a few years prior to COVID. We formed a prostate awareness Bermuda. We didn't want to be called prostate cancer Bermuda because there are some issues where men have inflamed or their prostates grow. They don't have prostate cancer. It could be a prelude to prostate cancer, but they're not prostate cancer is not prostate cancer at that time. So we wanted to make sure that when we named ourselves, it was called Prostate Awareness Bermuda, not prostate cancer for that
Mm.
reason.
Hmm.
So it was basically a think tank where we'll sit down and talk, and we'll talk to brothers, other people, other brothers about the journey, various things. Because as I told you before, there are various ways of dealing with it. So in our group, or everybody in our group, somebody has been through one of those different ways and can tell you. So if you're thinking of going with radiation, for example, we know of someone who's going through radiation and can give you the darn dirty on what's going to happen and everything else like that. So we were doing this for quite some time. Then COVID hit. When COVID hit, we had a WhatsApp chat group, and we were doing the same things via WhatsApp chat. So we've actually had a few people join our WhatsApp group. My current physician has been an advocate and has kind of put us out there, and because she knows exactly about my prostate journey, and if she knows of any male, she'll point them to me, and I'll add them to the group. Or if something happens like the Daily Mail group with Dr. Macanjula, which is what's going on now, which is like
Yeah.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It is taken off in the island. And this is the group that, as you started in the intro, that are providing man health screening for free. Um, Bermuda is a beautiful place, and in my opinion, there's no more beautiful place in the world. But it's extremely expensive. The cost of living and insurance and everything else is really high. With COVID has made it a little bit more taxing because people are now having to look at whether they're going to be paying their light and gas bills or they're going to be eating or getting medications and various things, particularly those that have single incomes and
Mm-hmm.
various other things. So it's been particularly hard. So when I heard about the Daily Mail group, it was something that, I said, yeah, I want to be part of this. And this is outside of my prostate awareness group. So another friend of mine, John, and we met with Dr. Mack and we started talking and we started talking about his vision and what he sees about it. He's English. He's married to a Bermudian, a black English urologist, and he sees so much stuff in Bermuda. He's been here since like I think September, and he's touched so many people, not literally, but he's touched so many people
No.
from, and has inspired the Daily Mail group is run by a group of ladies, and there's too many of them to mention, but their machinery is awesome. They're getting out there. They really care about men, and Dr. Mack is actually pushing it from a physician point of view. He's getting other doctors to volunteer, other nurses to volunteer. So we're doing these screenings. There have been 3 this year already, and I was supposed to be for the first, but when um, they went, John and Dr. Mack went on one of the local radio stations, and I was supposed to go with them, but at that time, I had just lost a family member, and that's been another up and down thing since November. We've had, we we're both, my wife and I are both fortunate to have like long, long life in our family. On I think the 20th of November, my father-in-law, her father passed away. Her grandmother her grandmother was 103, would have been 104 on December. I'm not even quoting date because she'll get mad at me by getting it. But
Yeah.
anyway, um, she would have been 104. We were calling at her house to let her know that her son had passed, and the caregiver said she was hysterical and she had passed. So my grand my father-in-law and my grandmother-in-law passed on the same day, an hour apart. That was heavy for the family.
Mhm.
Um, very, very difficult to deal with. Um, then we had another family member that passed just around the Christmas time, just before Christmas. Then I had my grandmother Bina, her sister passed 101, I think. She used to stay like the one house removed from my next door neighbor, so I could actually throw a stone over to her house. She passed at 104. She passed on our anniversary, December 26th. So within a period, and then my uncle, my mother's my maternal uncle, my mother's brother, he passed at 80, no, 90, 91, 92, sorry. He passed in February. So we've had all these close people, and of the five, two, three of them, we've had intimate involvements in the funerals, the passing, and all the
Right.
rest of that type of stuff. So it's been quite taxing from that point of view, and emotionally stressful. And that's why, I say that she is a gem because she's just kept on going and everything else. And, she has some moments and everything else. And I try to be there for her, and she's been there for me. So it's we have this symbiotic relationship that is second to none. And without her, she's helped me to grow even more. We don't butt heads. We gel together.
Mm-hmm.
Even we have disagreements. We always have everybody has disagreements, but we always try to keep the prize in sight, like what we want to do. We want to keep our relationship together. We talk through things, we communicate. A lot of the
Mm.
things that you can read books about and everything else, but we actually practice those things, and it works. So
So
yeah.
as I wanted to ask you, because we're moving towards wrapping up. I didn't want to
Oh,
interrupt
sorry,
you. No, no,
sorry, sorry.
no, no, no. But you went right to what I was going to ask you next was as you're moving into this next stage of your life, because as you said, you're turning 60 this year, you could double your lifespan. When I think about the family members you just listed who were like some of them in their hundreds, and I
Mm-hmm,
know on my side as well, my grandmother that raised me passed this past January at the age of
mm-hmm,
96.
mm-hmm,
My grandfather, who also raised me, passed at 92.
mm-hmm.
Uh, my great grandparents were 88 and 91. So on both sides of our family, it seems like long life
Longevity.
is in the cards. So
Mm-hmm.
even at turning 60, and I'm moving closer to 50, how do you see the next stage of your life balancing work, play, grandchildren, relationships?
Mm-hmm.
um I know you're doing so much community work right now. Like, what are you kind of aiming for, planning for, wishing for?
Yeah, I think, well, I never saw myself as being 60. It's just you just don't think, even saying it kind of sounds foreign. But yeah, it's I want to get to the point where I'm really liking the philanthropic side of my life so far. I like
Mhm.
helping people. I've always that's something that's always been a part of me. With, for example, the Peaksfield Family Connection, when we had the playground that burnt down 2 years ago, and the community came together, and it was like, look, we have to do something and everything else. And they entrusted myself along with our dynamic group of people, an executive that are second to none. And all of us have other jobs and areas, other things, but we took time out. We were meeting like on a weekly basis and various other things. It took 2 years for us to get the playground equipment in and done and dusted. But there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into it, and it's so rewarding. Right now, we have a Facebook page. We have, and one of the PRO, another Mrs. Paynter. Actually, her husband is part of the executive, and he's my cousin,
Mm,
our cousin. Sorry, our cousin.
it's okay.
And she's a local celebrity. She's actually the International Woman of the Year for Bermuda. She's a phenomenal person, and I always tell her that she's the engine room behind PXP Family Connection. And to see, we got some videos the other day. We have another chat group, another WhatsApp chat group, and we have seen videos of one of the local nurseries having sports day up on the field and stuff
Hmm.
like that there, and seeing everybody come together. The local H&H Gumbays, they practice on Pigs Field. The North Village Community Club, they do netball training on the field. And to see like the vibrance and hear the children laughter and everything else, like that's what really like warms my heart, man. Maybe I'm getting old and soft nowadays, but I really, I really love to hear that, and to know that I've done something that can help out the community. And that's one thing about me. I'm always put myself second. I've always put myself behind, something that me and my wife kind of grapple with from time to time, because I'm not the obstetrician. I'm not the eye doctor. I die, I is we, and I look at everything else, and it's kind of difficult, to be honest, for myself to say I, even if it's only me. And if I do something, I do it from my heart. I don't expect anything back. I don't do anything to say, okay, well, if I hook Megan up, she could hook me up and everything else. Like, no, if I hook Megan up, she will hook me up and everything else. It's a natural thing versus grabbing it.
Yep.
Little subtle difference, but
Yes.
that's real. So I'm now getting ready. So technically speaking, I can retire early at 60, being a government officer. I will have to look at that seriously at 65, because that's when they start talking. That's when you should retire.
Mm.
Although there has been a provision made in the government to extend that to 68. So you can technically work up to your 68. Um, I still have a mortgage and a few other things that I need to take care of and take care of
Mm.
my family. So I would like to do some work that helps people. I want to be as helpful. I really get a kick out. I like technology. I love technology. I'm always poking and prodding in computers
Mm.
or different other things like that around the house and everything. I've been blessed to work with my hands and doing construction and stuff like doing electrician work and various other things. And now with like YouTube, you can actually go and learn how to do things yourself.
Yeah.
Great. I want to be happy. I want to plan a nice future with my wife and how many days we have left
Mm-hmm.
after this grind we call work and everything else. I like to
Mm-hmm.
still be helping people. I still like to do things, and maybe I'm at a point that maybe this might be a career move into getting into helping and everything else. One of the things that Dr. Mack and the Daily Mail are looking at is bringing one of those operating machines in Bermuda. So after going through the fundraising that we did for the Peaks Field, there's a possibility that I might join them as far as fundraising and get behind that. I would like to be able to bring that Rolls Royce type service that I was fortunate enough, and a couple other guys have been fortunate enough to have out of Florida, bring that into Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Mack has talked to Dr. Patel in Florida, and he seems to be on board. So this is like it's
So
exciting
many
me to read.
possibilities.
Yeah, man, there's
Yeah.
so many possibilities and everything else. And like I'm not in it for me. I'm not in it to make millions of dollars or whatever. I just want to be happy, functional, and live a comfortable life and be happy. I
Yeah.
happiness is what it's about. So that's what I envisage like as I go into my 60s this year.
Yeah. I am so grateful that you are my brother and that you are thriving in this world and you're part of my life and Sheena's life and your kids' life and Bermudian's life. You've done so much over these last few years. I've always loved talking to you, but I wanted to have you on the show so more people could meet you and learn about you and all the good that you're doing. And I think you've shared some really, we were kind of talking a little more offline before this about how talking about prostate cancer or my recent experiences with women's health and to do with like sexual function and like the quote unquote private areas of the body, it's not always
Hmm.
the easiest thing for people to talk about. And I think you've made a real difference for a lot of people, just as some others did for you, in talking about something that can be so difficult to acknowledge and is typically thought of as taboo or private. You've brought it to the forefront, and that is life-saving,
Mm.
right? And talking about these things, and so that there isn't this fear associated with
Hmm.
what might be an uncomfortable exam. But if this is going to save your life, I think if more people understand the process and what's behind it and what the pre-care is, what the post-care is, the more you share this experience, like you're doing through the Daily Mail, like you're doing personally coming onto this podcast, I really really hope that people will listen to and watch this
Mm.
episode, and that if they are battling prostate cancer or another type of um, invasive, disease in the body, that this gives them some steps to navigate their
Hmm.
journey, resources to reach out. So I just want to thank you so much for all you're doing and for coming onto the show and being willing to talk about it. And mostly, thank you for being my brother and for loving me no matter what. We've always
No
had
matter
that
what.
kind of, I know, that
Absolutely.
relationship. We're the same in that way. Like, I
Hmm.
don't get paid to do this podcast. I do it because I want to have these really cool conversations with people who are doing amazing things in the world in the hopes that it's going to help another person. You never know.
Mm.
And I get those emails sometimes. You never know how an episode's going to hit. And
Hmm.
then I'll get a message from somebody saying, like, this particular guest or someone mentioned this particular thing that made a big difference in someone's life. And I have
Mm.
no doubt that that's going to happen with today's episode. So thank
And,
you.
Yeah, that's what happens all the time. It's like, you talk about things and then somebody will just hit you up and we'll I have no problem with you giving out my informations or whatever, my numbers and stuff like hit me up on WhatsApp. I have friends, I talk about it everywhere because if I can touch one person and make a difference in one person's life, that's great, and the more people that we do that to, if I reach you, you reach out to somebody else and they reach out to somebody else, it has that snowball effect. So
Mm-hmm.
by all means, like I said, I'm an open book. I'm not no angel. I'm not I have my shortcomings as well. However, I try, and again, this is the engineer in me. I try to make sure that whatever decisions I make or what I do, if I don't have the answers myself, I know where I can go to. Like we have Dr. Mack has actually joined our prostate group, and he's
Mm-hmm.
actually providing information, real time, up to date information on the latest, greatest techniques and various other things like that. So it's like this is what it's about, and bringing that awareness out, and men not having someone that they can talk to, like not wanting to prolong it anymore. But when I went to the last clinic, there was a gentleman that was, he was on the fence on which way he wanted to go, type of thing. And Dr. Mack had asked me to have a word with him, talk about my experience and what's happening and answer some questions. And it made a difference in his life.
Yeah.
You don't know, hearing all the medical thing. One thing, Dr. Mack has a good bedside mannerism. He's a good, approachable type of dude. He's a guy that, you can walk up and have a beer with, or you can sit down and talk about all the medical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's good in that. I get, but in talking to people, he's coming in talking to men. He's talking primarily from the medical point of view. This is what's happening, blah 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 blah. But hearing it from someone who's a survivor, who's actually going on and going through it, and as I say, with the group, our group, sorry, we have all the different variations or whatever. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
route you decide to take, I can put you with someone who could tell you the goods, bads, the ins and outs, and everything else. And normally there are two or three different people because unfortunately there's no standard. There's no there's no way of saying like your experience is different than you could have the same procedure and have two or three different outcomes, and that's sad. It really is sad because some of this stuff is unavoidable. There's always that one in so many chances that you
Right.
might be the check, but 90%, if given all the information and what to ask, and again, when we find out that somebody has like prostate cancer, make sure you ask about this, ask about that, make sure that you take control of your life. You do this. If you don't feel comfortable, change your doctor, get another opinion, those type of things. And just having men talk to men makes a big difference rather than hearing it from a guy in a white coat all the time. And that's why,
Yeah.
like I said,
It's a
I have no
human
problem in
the human experience and the human connection, right? On all
hmm
those different levels. So
hmm
what we should do, so listeners, if you want to get in touch with Rhydell or the groups that he's involved with, I'm going to connect with him after the show. If there's any links we can put in the show notes where you could maybe find the Daily Mail online or links to the WhatsApp group, we'll figure it out and I'll post it in the show notes. If you still have questions, please just email me myyogaaudio@gmail.com and I will get you connected with Rhydell and the groups that he's working with. Does that sound good to you, Rhydell?
great,
You think?
great,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Ah, wonderful. Well, I want to wrap. Well, I don't want to wrap for today. I want to. We can
We
keep
could go on
chatting.
for hours and
I
hours,
know.
as we always do.
I know. It's the best part. So thank you to everyone who is listening and has come through this episode with us. I want to ask you a favor to please share this episode directly with somebody that you think they need this conversation, they need this information, they need this inspiration. Yes, Rydell is my brother, but he's also a survivor and he's giving back to his community in the form of information and personal connection. And that's what this podcast is all about. And Spotify has told me that something like 30% of our listeners share episodes directly through text or email when they hear something, right, that really appeals to them. So I hope this is your opportunity to do that and make a difference in someone's life. And so we will close out for today because here at My Yoga Audio, we say, It's always a great time for your mind to be, or your body to be on the mat wherever you are. So, whatever your form of yoga is, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, this is the time for you to connect with that inner self and that higher self and decide what this information is revealing to you today and who you may or may not need to share it with. So, until next time, when we have another guest, a meditation, or a book reading, I hope you'll come back to past episodes and catch up on any episodes that you might have missed. And we will sign off for now. And everybody, take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.